folks, welcome back to physics. In this video, you will learn how to build a better paper airplane. By the end of this video, you will be able to design an experiment that improves upon traditional paper airplane design. So, I'm going to start with this question. How can we build the best paper airplane? I want you to take a moment, think, what do you think goes into building a good paper airplane? And what do you think about this question? So, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead, move forward to talking about the scientific method. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use the scientific method to build a better airplane. So there are a few major steps in the scientific method. So the first thing is having a research question. So right now our research question is, how can we build a better paper airplane? And what you're going to want to do is when you have that initial question, you'll do some background research. So for something like paper airplanes, what you might look at are, what are the qualities of a paper airplane? What can you change about them? You might also think about what makes a paper airplane good. So what is the ideal of a paper airplane? Ideal qualities, maybe. So then, using your background research, you'll work to refine your research question and create an experiment. And you'll start by defining your independent variable, which is the thing you change, your dependent variable, which is the thing you measure. You'll think about controlled variables, which are going to be things you could change but aren't. So for example, with a paper airplane, you might say, I could change the weight of the paper airplane, but I'm not going to. So that would be something you would control. Something that is not a controlled variable is something you don't have control over. So for example, you don't have control over how sunny it is outside. So that's not going to be a controlled variable. So with that, you're going to use your IV and DV to write a hypothesis. So if I do something to the IV, then I will measure some change in the dependent variable. Using your hypothesis, you're going to design your experiment. So you're going to come up with a procedure. You should consider having multiple trials, and you should think about the tools you're going to use. So one thing that's important is in your experimental design and in your procedure, you need to talk about how you will control for your controlled variables. So how will you control controlled variables? So what I mean by that is if one of your controlled variables is the weight of your paper airplane, then you have to say specifically how you will ensure that the weight of each paper airplane is the same. So you could say, I will control for the weight of the paper airplane by using only one piece of paper for each airplane and nothing else. So that's going to be your procedure. Step 4. Step 5, following your procedure, you'll collect your data. Then you'll analyze that data, write some kind of conclusion. And step 8, you might think about some future research. So a lot of the time, when you finish doing an experiment, you'll realize that you've answered one question, but created 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more. So your future research would be talking about those further questions you have and what you could do to study those. So what I want to do is talk through the first 2 steps of our scientific method with our question. So how can we build the best paper airplane is a decent question to start, but it needs some refining. So one of the things that we need to think about is, what does it mean for your paper airplane to be the best? What does that word mean? So there are a few different qualities of paper airplane that could make it good, right? So maybe you want your airplane to fly a longer time. So fly a long time in air. Maybe what you care about is its range, which is how far it goes. Maybe for you, what makes a paper airplane good is how straight it flies. Others might be interested in how high the plane goes. And I'm sure you can think of some other ways to define what best is. So the first step is for your experiment is going to be to decide, how are you defining best? And what I recommend is picking one of these 4 things and deciding and using that as your best. The other thing that we're going to want to think about is the word build. So build is an interesting term in that there are a lot of things about a paper airplane that you could change in order to improve it. So let's think about some parts of the airplane design that are useful. So one thing you might think about is wingspan. So how do you have big wings or small wings? You could also think about the length of the airplane. So is it a whole piece of paper long? Is it half a piece of paper? Something like that. You could think about the weight. So did you make it out of one piece of paper or two? And I'm sure there are other things you could think of as well that might be things you could change about the build. So what you're going to do for this lab is you're going to pick one thing from the build category and one thing from the best category. The thing from the build category will be your IV, and the thing from the best category will be your DV. And what you're going to do is design an experiment using these things. So your first step is going to be to write a research question. So for example, what you might say is, how does the IV affect your DV? So if I chose wingspan, I could say, how does wingspan affect my airtime? And then from that, I would define my IV and my DV, and I would write a hypothesis, and I would create a procedure. So that is what you guys are going to do. You're going to fill in the blanks here. You're going to pick an IV from that right-hand column and a DV from the left-hand column. Or if you want to pick something else, you can do that as well. Just let me know ahead of time. And then you're going to design an experiment that you can use to answer your research question. So let's go ahead and talk about takeaways. So first of all, the scientific method is a way to answer questions about the natural world. So it's about finding questions you care about and figuring out how you can take measurements that might answer your question. Secondly, an important part of following the scientific method is asking a clear research question. So when we had our initial research question, how can we build the best paper airplane? It was a bit vague. There were a lot of different ways we could define a lot of the terms in that question. So what you want to do often is use your research to refine your research question to make it a clear experiment. And a lot of the time, research questions will take the form, how does the IV affect the DV? So there you have it, guys. Go ahead and give it a try yourself. Best of luck with the lab.